English translation. 319th contact, Sunday, 3rd February 2002 was 0:43 hours.
Hello to you too, my friend. Be welcomed.
Today is your 65th birthday. I say this exceptionally because according to Swiss law, from today you are retired.
Funny, I do not feel that old at all. And I cannot get it into my head that I am an AHV pensioner as of today.
And yet it is so.
Of course I know. For many, the 65th birthday is something special and joyful because it allows them to free themselves from the obligation of work.
I do not think you will be able to do that. I can also detect no joy in you with regard to your retirement. Also, another kind of pleasure I miss in you.
How could it be otherwise? I know very well where your illusion is going.
That should not be difficult to guess, because I see your sorrow and the worries about Edith, which are unfortunately justified because, as I noticed on Friday and also today, an unusually negative change is going on in her, but she does not realize it herself.
Please, let us not talk about that. On the other hand, I have made the same and even more profound observations, so I know everything.
My findings are also very profound and frightening. But excuse me, if you do not want to talk about it, then I understand, and I want to remain silent.
Thanks. So let us talk about something else. Recently, I was working on an old contact report, and I came across the pyramids, in terms of how they were made, even the how. On the one hand, there was talk about human muscle power, and on the other hand, there was talk about telekinetic powers having played a role.
Both are correct, but we actually gave you an enlightening answer about that at earlier times. On the one hand, about 200,000 human beings were involved in the construction work with their physical strength and efforts. But on the other hand, there were also a few extraterrestrial humans from the constellations of Orion and Leo who had telekinetic powers and used them to a small extent in the construction of the pyramids. However, this telekinetic involvement of the extraterrestrials was really only small, even if it is emphasized, but this is only for the reason that it was based on consciousness and not on muscle power. The human beings who had to do the hardest physical work at the pyramid constructions were often prisoners and slaves, and many thousands died of complete exhaustion during the hard work. However, the miserably deceased were replaced again and again by new prisoners and new slaves, as well as by other laborers who had been brought in. In total, 40,738 human beings died during the construction of the pyramids and in the partly underground quarries where the large stone blocks were chiseled out.
That is now clear. Then this, for decades, time and again, so-called peace organizations have appeared on the scene, which arranged peace demonstrations and acted and are acting as if they could not hurt a fly and were only committed to peace. And it is the very same peace criers of yesterday, the day before yesterday and earlier years and decades that are today crying out for revenge, hatred, retribution, and the death penalty, and advocating American counterterrorism against Afghanistan and other countries. Shouting, screaming, howling and wailing, they used to demonstrate for peace. And today, the same demonstrators of those times are crying out for revenge, retaliation, hatred, death, ruin, destruction, and annihilation. What do you think about that?
According to fear or advantage, the human beings of the earth change their attitude. Thus, peace demonstrators become the ones screaming for war, as well as advocates of revenge and retaliation when they tremble in fear, such as a result of terrorist attacks, etc. Therefore, they believe that they are being offered security and that they will not suffer any harm. But this is just as much an unparalleled cowardly act as when warmongers, as well as criers of hate, revenge, and retaliation, political subversives and similar demonstrators defect to those against whom they have acted wildly, demonstrated against, and attacked.
By this you mean human beings in the so-called left and right camps who first shout pro and hurrah for a cause, but then, when they can gain real or hoped-for advantages and profits from it, change camp and turn their flag according to the wind that is blowing in their favor.
That is the meaning of my words. Sorry, that is what saddens me.
So you are also looking around. What is wrong with you all of a sudden?
Through what I have said, I have created associations in me that grieve me. Actually, it moves me a lot and makes me cry inside.
I do not understand.
The connections are sometimes strange. Also,
Unfortunately, dear friend, I really do not understand.
you asked me not to talk about it.
You leave me at a loss.
I am seized by a deep inner stirring as a result of Edith's actions, which I cannot understand. I have always lovingly locked her in my thoughts. By her actions, she evades her obligation to her own life. She is unable to come to terms with reality and seeks justifications for her actions in many respects. Although these justifications cannot be relevant in any wise, even if she imagines them to be and passes them on as such. In truth, however, it is her impermanence in which she lives. Through it she alienates herself from reality, from herself, and sees everything differently than it corresponds to the authenticity. Through this, a very negative change takes place in her, whereby the old forms of dilemma take possession of her again.
Dear friend, I understand your feelings and thoughts, but please, we really should not talk about it anymore. We have no choice but to let her go her way, even if it is hard for us.
Sorry, but due to my associations, I felt the need to express my thoughts.
You do not have to apologize because I understand you very well. I have the same thoughts and feelings inside of me, too. But we really have to turn away from them and let the girl go her own way, no matter how hard it may be for us.
I did not think that at my age anything could affect me in such a manner that crying would be a relief.
Tell me about it. Age plays really no role in this.
That is of correctness, Ketzel would now say.
I can almost hear him. But let us talk about something else. Can you tell me to what extent mobile phones should actually be used in a restricted environment? You once made a remark about this, but I am not familiar with it anymore.
It was said that mobile telephones are particularly dangerous in terms of their radiation in terms of heating the human brain, especially when the equipment is used in closed rooms, such as in apartments or other buildings, but also in underground facilities, as well as in tunnels, caves, and sewers. Such a special danger also exists in all enclosed vehicles and missiles, such as cars, aircraft, railways, etc. It should also be noted that mobile telephones that are switched on should not be worn on the body, especially not at or near the heart and other vital organs such as the lungs, kidneys, and liver, etc.
Should a woman be artificially inseminated for offspring if she is misandrist, hostile towards men?
Such a procreation can never be reconciled with ethics, but neither with self-responsibility and responsibility for life. If a progeny is produced in a just and responsible wise, then the corresponding procreator, together with the mother, must also take on the corresponding upbringing of the progeny. But this requires that between and among the two of them, there is a significant and valuable familiarity and love. Procreation of offspring is a far-reaching responsibility for the offspring itself as well as for the father and mother, whereby the latter are obliged to offer the offspring a secure life, a secure home, and the best possible education.
What about when a woman, for the sake of rationality, refrains from marrying the procreator after procreation, because the latter somehow transgresses, and the marital union would possibly turn into a disaster?
First of all, it should be taken care that a pregnancy does not occur, so that everything concerning the behavior of the man, as well as of the woman, must be clarified, after which only then can a decision be made as to whether a pregnancy is justified.
But a lot of women get pregnant without these issues being clarified, simply because of careless and inconsiderate actions. So what should happen to the offspring when the mother is alone with the child?
Then she has to bear the responsibility for it and to take all necessary steps on her own initiative so that the child can enjoy a good and right education and lead a decent life that is not impaired by any shortcomings. If this is not possible for the mother, then it is appropriate that she should seek help. However, if the mother is incapable of these difficult tasks, then the godparents or competent institutions must take responsibility.
Then what if lesbians or gay men adopt children?
If the necessary prerequisites are met by them, as I have mentioned, then such an adoption should have nothing standing against it.
But there are many Earth humans who are against lesbians or homosexual men adopting children, probably because they are negative about these sexually different people. On the one hand, I think that these sexually different people should have the same rights and obligations in every respect as the so-called normal people, as many heterosexuals are arrogant towards lesbians and homosexual men and despise them.
Then I do not have to say anything about it, because I agree with your thoughts and with your opinion.
How do you feel about surrogacy?
Surrogacy means a violation of all duties of parenthood. But it also means that such an act violates all rules of reverence and ethics and tramples them underfoot.
If artificial insemination takes place, as it very often happens here on the Earth, whereby the sperm donors remain unrecognized by the sperm recipients and consequently also by the offspring, should the latter then really not be allowed to meet the actual progenitor, as it is the case here on the Earth?
This is against all reverence for life and against all ethics and morals. Every child has a right to know the father progenitor in order to turn to him, if this is in the interest and will of the offspring. If action is taken against it, then such artificial procreation is tantamount to criminal trafficking in human beings. For even if a mother buys a man's sperm for artificial insemination, or if she receives it as a gift, then it is a matter of life in whichever wise, and such life should never be sold or bought. But if such insemination does take place, then a purchased serfdom by the mother is created for the offspring.
Now, I would like to know what will happen in Palestine and Israel if that can be said officially.
The Palestinians are starting a war of terror like never before, and Israel will act in the same wise. Ariel Sharon is responsible for all mutual acts of terror. Mutual Israeli and Palestinian acts of terrorism will therefore likewise increase on a large scale and degenerate more and more, so that everything will amount to a war of terror waged by both sides. By Sharon's orders, the administrative buildings of the government and security forces in the autonomous areas of Palestine will be attacked and destroyed without hesitation, and even buildings with prisoners will not be spared. Ariel Sharon is as irresponsible and inhuman a person as the leaders of the Palestinian terrorists. And terrorism is practiced on both sides, because on both sides the criminal acts, attacks and onslaughts are in no wise any form of defense or other justified acts, but solely acts of terrorism, murder, and fanatical fighting, which bring neither peace nor any benefit whatsoever, but only destruction, death, suffering, pain, and ruin.
That is the way I see it also.
If you have no more questions, then I would like to turn away from all these unpleasant things now. If it pleases you, then I would like to play chess with you in the joy of a chess game.
Of course. Then let us start right away.